Hi, this is Stevie. If you want to get looser with your watercolor floral paintings, try painting a white flower without drawing it first. It's great practice and helps build muscle memory so you can do it automatically in the future. So I start with just plain water, and the first thing I do is establish where the center of the flower is. And I'm just going around it with water and then adding a little bit of yellow color to mark that center, pointing to my light source in the upper right corner. And as I put in some yellow, notice that I leave some white in the center. That adds a lot more interest as you go along. Now I'm just using a little more water to indicate the directions of those petals. And remember that the way that I drew this is an elliptical shape. It's not round. So your petals on the left and right edges, where I'm working right now, are going to be a little longer than the petals on the other sides. So what I did was I took a very light wash of Antwerp blue, just almost all water, but just a little bit of blue to get kind of the outer shape of the flower. It doesn't have to be perfect, and you don't have to draw every petal, but just something to get you started. Then I'm using a little more of Antwerp blue mixed with transparent orange oxide, and I'm just working that color out. I start at the edge of the flower, and I use a lot of water as I pull it out. I pull out the color, and that's going to make some leaf shapes later on, but right now I'm not worried so much about that. It's just some random color. But do notice that as I pull the color out toward the edges, the color gets lighter. I add more water so that the whole background isn't really dark. So I go around the flower, purposely leaving some areas where I'm going to lose those edges, just to add interest. So I'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into those areas. I'm going back, adding a little bit of the same color in certain areas, but you can see the shape of the flower start to emerge. Now I'm adding a little bit of darker color around the base of that center. That is some more transparent orange oxide. And I'm using my mix of Antwerp blue and trans oxide orange to again darken the foliage around the edges. And there I'm starting to really darken some areas. Pick out some areas, not the whole flower, but pick out some areas where you want to get some dark in there, and it's generally where you want to define the petal a little more. And as you can see, I pull out that color, and as I work my brush around, it creates the shape of some leaves, just some kind of background foliage. Don't worry too much about the shapes. Sometimes it really means nothing, but when you get finished, it'll look good. So I just continue on around like that. Notice I don't do it in every little space. You don't want anything just to be totally outlined. You can see here I'm just making some other random strokes and indicating a stem at the bottom. You can see where I'm going to leave some lost edges, and as I get closer to those lost edges, I will get some dark around it to emphasize them. Here I'm making some shapes that could be leaves later on. Again, when I pull that color out, I'm adding a lot of water so that the dark color doesn't go all the way out to the edge. There's another area that I'm defining the shape a little bit, adding some color and then pulling it out with water. As I get up in this area, I'm going to leave some light areas where it'll look like the edges are lost. So now I've got the basic shape, and that could be a daisy or some flower like that. If you're going to make a daisy shape, don't define each petal all the way around. It gets to be very boring to do that. But when people look at this in a painting, they're going to know that that's a daisy. And we'll do a little bit more to define some of those petals in a bit. I'm just continuing to darken up some areas, moving to a little bit smaller brush. These are Princeton brushes, Princeton Heritage brushes that I'm using. I think I changed to a number 6 from an 8, just because it has a nice point and I can really get into those fine areas where I'm trying to separate the petals a little bit. But notice that I don't do that all the way around, just here and there. And I didn't use very many colors in this painting. Normally I would add a lot more colors to the background and drop in some other colors. I'll demonstrate that in another video, but I really just wanted to keep this a lesson in painting a white flower and how to do it without drawing it. Now I'm adding a purple color for some shadows, and I mix that up with Antwerp blue and a bit of permanent rose, not too much permanent rose. And Antwerp blue has a lot of green in it, so that makes a nice gray. And as you can see, when I start to put in those shadow colors, note that I'm starting at the center of the flower where my color is the darkest, but then I use water to pull that color out. Don't pull solid color all the way out to the petal, you'll cover the entire petal. If this is a white flower, you want to keep some of it white. But the shadows make a lot of interest and they define the shape of those petals. So I'm continuing to go around to make the shadows on my petal shapes. I didn't spend time on this video worrying about the petals and the light, making the shadows and the light source. Just too many things to think about. I'll talk about that later on. But I just wanted to get the shapes in so you can see those. The other thing you can do with the shadow color is separate the petals a little bit. That's what I'm doing here. And I pull out or indicate the shape of the petal, put a line next to the side of a petal, but then I blend one side of it with just plain water to soften that line. But what it ends up looking like petals are overlapping each other. Now I'm going back in, strengthening those shadows a bit around the center of the flower, giving it more depth. That helps that center of the flower to sit down in the painting when you add the darkness around it. And when I pull back a little bit, you'll be able to see where some of the petals look like they have lost edges. You don't want a hard edge around your entire painting, or around your entire flower. It's just not very interesting. Try to make a conscious effort to leave some lost edges. And you can even go in while it's still wet and lose an edge if you forget to do that while you're painting. Now I'm darkening up the area under the bottom of the flower, making a stem shape, and notice where I'm adding that much. It's the same mix of Antwerp blue and the transoxide orange, but notice where I put it in darker, especially under that front petal. It makes the petal really come forward, and that's the value of getting, and you don't need that dark value all over the painting. Up close to the flower, you want it near your center of interest, and then as you get out to the edges, you lighten it up. And again, I'm just making very random strokes. The brush I'm using now is a silver brush. It's a 1/4-inch dagger, and I love that brush for florals because it makes great foliage. And I use it on flowers too, but you can see how long the bristles are, and you can really dance that brush around to get just various different shapes that really look nice as just background foliage. And see, I can manipulate that brush to create leaves, which I'm doing here. Just quickly make the shape of a leaf. And I really don't like painting leaves, and I try to make them as subtle as possible. So I'll indicate a shape like that, and I'll show you later on how I can go back and just further define that a little bit. But I don't like to just paint a leaf. I never have good luck with that. I do better if I just can kind of pull it out from the background. Here I'm going in, strengthening the values in the center again. I took my transoxide orange and added some alizarin crimson to it, and just going around the base of that center. And still have a little bit of my white in there. I like to keep some white. Really makes that center pop when you do that. Again, picking up my background color again, the Antwerp blue and transoxide orange. Here's where I'm pulling out a leaf. I'm kind of making up the shape as I go. So I decide, where would I want a leaf? And what I'm doing is really just kind of outlining it, but I use plain water. What you see now is plain water. I know it looks dark on the screen, but that's just plain water. So I pick up some color to make the line, and then I immediately pull that color out with plain water. And when somebody looks at that, they can tell that's a leaf without being so obvious about it. Here I'm doing one on the other side, and even if you just do the one stroke without finishing the other side, you can still tell that's a leaf. It leaves something to the imagination. So we've got a variety of things. There are some strokes down at the bottom that actually look like leaves, and then these leaves that I've kind of pulled out of thin air. I'm going to do one more. I wouldn't do too many. Try to keep them limited in your paintings, otherwise it'll become very noticeable. So here's another one where, without doing anything else, you can tell that that's a leaf. I think I go back in and add a little bit to the other side, but not a complete stroke. Just a little bit to suggest that that's a leaf. So there you have it. That's my completed little painting. It's small, 4 by 5. I hope that was helpful, and thanks for watching.